Section by section or verse by verse, you're going to cover sections that sometimes if you try to do a theme or whatnot, you kind of overlook, or more than that, you can be like a little sure that you're actually hearing God's voice rather than my voice. Because as we read all of Galatians and as we study all of Galatians, I'm not trying to teach you just what I think you should know. I'm trying to teach you everything that the book of Galatians is trying to teach us. And so, briefly, I want to start today as we begin week 6 of Galatians. I want to remind us what this book is about, what Galatians is all about. So the thing that's so amazing about the book of Galatians is that the book of Galatians is a book about the gospel. And if you've been here since we first started studying Galatians, you would kind of get that theme, or you would get that idea that the book of Galatians is a book about the gospel. And sometimes you have to stand back far enough to kind of see the big picture. And then if you read, for instance, verses 6, 7, 8, and 9, the 4 verses here in chapter 1, the word gospel shows up 5 times in those 4 or 5 verses. So the book of Galatians is about the gospel. It's about the essential message of Christianity. It's about the basic message, the basic facts, the basic truths of Christianity. That's what Galatians is all about. So it's showing us what is the gospel and what's not the gospel. And here's the important part. And here's the neat or the cool thing about the book of Galatians. The book of Galatians, it's not for non-Christians. The book of Galatians, even though it's all about the gospel, it's not about seducing, or it's not about trying to convince non-believers. It's not for unbelievers. It's not for people who say, I don't believe the gospel. The whole book of Galatians is a book on the gospel, a book communicating the gospel, explaining the gospel, applying the gospel, and it is a book for Christians. A book for people who already say that they believe in the gospel. And that's the forest of Galatians. You know, as we go verse by verse, sometimes we're standing right in front of like a couple of trees. And so the idea is, if we step back and we look at the entire forest of the book of Galatians, as we study it, keep in mind that this is Paul explaining the gospel to Christians like you and I. Paul is not explaining the gospel to non-believers. He's writing this book to a church. And a church is composed of believers. A church is composed of Christians, people who already have proclaimed faith on Jesus Christ. So Paul is not explaining the gospel to non-believers. He is reminding and re-explaining the gospel to the church.